is here are a list of just some of my pet peeves of things that show up in lots of the things which people write. So I'm always looking for ways to be more concise. That is, say the same thing in fewer words. You probably do not believe that advice coming from a professor, but I try hard. You should too. And some of the things that you can do, here are just a few of examples of just some useless phrases that you can cross out, or words that you can use synonyms that are shorter. Some other kinds of things to watch for, whether you're writing for a journal or for the proposals that we're talking about this week, are things like missing spaces. As I've been watching over people's shoulders, one of the things that many of you are waiting until later to fix, let's say, are spaces before and after commas and periods in between words and things like that. As you're trying to get your thoughts on paper, not worrying about those things is just fine, but before it goes into the funding source, you need to make sure that those are fixed. Particular places to watch out for are spaces around mathematical operators, where periods and commas go. Make sure that your capitalization is correct. Use a little bit of active voice. So if you keep saying a meeting will be called, it sort of gets kind of sleepy. If instead you say we will call a meeting, that's the difference between passive and active. Generally, we sort of expect science to be written in a passive voice. I don't know where that convention comes from. You should not deviate too far from it, but often saying things in an active voice will make things more compelling. Proper use of, and you have this document so you can read through them. You don't want me to read all the way through them now. I'm just highlighting a few. Proper places to use commas or not. That's what the example about mama was trying to tell you about. One of the things that I find common with many of the African students that I work with is the proper use of a, and the. I suspect that's because those are not present in your first languages, and so it seems odd in English. And if you ask a native English speaker how to do it, about all I can say is, well, I hear the right thing, but the truth is, I don't know exactly what the rules are either. I pick it up by ear. That makes it really hard for you to get it right. Try. And especially if you can have your work reviewed by a native English speaker, that helps. Present tense of the verb. So if somebody comes up to you and says, I will do so-and-so, like, I will build a device that sanitizes bacteria, isn't your first inclination to say, yeah, and maybe not? Yes? If somebody is saying they will do it, it sort of admits the possibility that maybe they won't. But if you say, this is my design, I have a device, or I have a design for a device, often, even when we're writing proposals that really are proposing something for the future, it may be okay to talk about it in the present tense, and the present tense is more powerful. The other thing that I found that underlines the usefulness of the present tense is when high Japanese officials get the 2-week crash course in English to come to the United States and establish their plant there or sell us cars or whatever, they only teach them the present tense. And the theory is, even if you're supposed to use a past tense or a future tense, people will understand if you say it in the present, so you can be understood more simply. I hope you know when you should use past and future, but it's still the case that the present tense is more powerful. Oh, the other thing it does, this proposal that you're writing, if all goes well, many of the words in your proposal are going to go into a journal article or a final report where the things in the proposal that you said so-and-so will be done, you're now going to say so-and-so was done. And you're going to fix some of those and not others if you're not careful, and you'll end up with some wills in your final report. and I don't mean last will and testament. Yeah? So if you write the proposal in the present tense, because the concept exists, and you write the final report in the present tense because the stuff that you have created still exists, you've got a lot less editing to do and you make fewer mistakes. My grandfather used to joke that the English and the Americans were separated by a common language. For most of the practice here in Africa, you're more heavily influenced by Great Britain, by the United Kingdom than by the United States. So the conventions here are almost always to follow the British spelling preference. And usually that means the British put a U in it where we don't. But be careful about that. If you're applying to an American institution, you're probably better off to use the American spelling. The Canadians are more like the United Kingdom, so they tend to use the U's when we don't. At least if your word is sort of complaining about things being misspelled, you might check, do you have British spelling or American spelling set up in your preferences, and make sure that you choose the one you really want. A couple of other things about roadmaps. By roadmap, I mean, as you're going along, it's really helpful to tell your reader what to expect. There are quite a few of you that when I've looked at your methods, you'll say, methods, by the way, the proper word, unless your funding agency says different, it's methods, it's not methodology. Methodology is a study of various methods. You are following a method. If your funding agency says methodology, say methodology, but it's wrong. It's not the only mistake they'll make. So if you say methods, and then you've got a heading, aim 1. It's really helpful, so it's generally considered bad practice to have two headings right in a row, consecutively. So what it's a good thing to do is just put a little sentence in there that says, in this section I'm going to explain the activities that I'm going to do, and I'm going to tell you about each of my objectives, or I'm going to tell you about where my data comes from, and then the kind of analysis that I'm going to do. But just give me 2 or 3 phrases so I know what's coming. Science should not read like a mystery novel. The reader should not be surprised, most of the time. Once in a while you want to, but not very often. And a roadmap that sort of leads the reader along. It's the same reason in a journal article where at the end of the introduction, you'll often have a paragraph that says, the rest of this paper is outlined as follows, so that the reader knows what to expect. My hunch is that most of the university lectures that you've heard, the ones that worked for you, the instructors started by saying, here's what we're going to talk about today. And we talk about it, and we get to the end and we say, here's what's happened while we've been here today, and you go off. So that's sort of a roadmap and a conclusion. Highly recommend it. Other parts of helping the reader doesn't apply as much to grants. It can sometimes, because the grant templates are often specified, but especially if the grant is fairly long. As you move from one section to the next, it's helpful in some way to say, okay, we've outlined for you the methods that we're going to do, and here's the main thing you're supposed to get out of that, and so now we're going to help you understand how we're going to be able to do that and talk about capabilities. That's a pretty lame transition, but you get the idea. Something to lead the reader along by the hand. So there are a whole bunch of other things in this document, which I'll hope that you will look at sometime when you are more alert than you probably are right now. So this is my au revoir. Sorry if I murdered that. My French was 50 years ago. I've really enjoyed being here. Part of the reason why I chose to come is I like being around smart people, and this has really been a joy to listen to all of the projects that you're describing in the last couple of days. So thank you very much for what you've given me.